Hello, welcome to another edition of the Low Code Campfire. This is episode number 106 for July 14th, 2023. I am Dale Warner, Head of Support for Plant an App, and I'll be your host for the next hour or so. We might talk more about DataLocker, which was a topic in Low Code Cafe this week, or anything else you want to talk about. This is an event we do once a week on Fridays this hour. It's an all skill levels welcome event. And we get together and share techniques and challenges related to Plant an App. We encourage you to bring something to show and to be ready to help with ideas and suggestions. We record all these episodes. They're out on YouTube, youtube.com/plantanApp in the Low Code Campfire playlist. Do subscribe and take a look at those other videos. We run this agenda week by week. We introduce ourselves. It's a meeting format, so you get to chat with each other. And we'll do a first call just in case anybody has something important to talk about, and then we'll pick from among these other topics, plus things that were submitted in advance. So do jump in. If you've got noise going on behind you, please be courteous and mute. You can submit questions and topics in advance. That link is in the emails that we send to you, but it's also can be done with this QR code. So, good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning,
everyone.
I don't know we need to do any introductions. Everyone is friends of the family here. So we'll jump right in. First call, what's going on? Let's start this way. Is there anybody that has any issues that we want to discuss today, and we'll get you on the list? Okay, I couldn't trick you into.
Surprisingly.
I'm sorry?
Surprisingly, I do not have anything to ask today. Success, though, the project that I have told the group about a couple of different times, where I created a little audio player for the client to replace a tool that they had, has been approved, successful. The client likes it. I had originally started with just a test file, so kind of hard coded the name of the file, and then got that part working. But then I jumped back, created an entity of the items, and then hooked those two together, and they all worked. So the client's happy.
Nice. And I'm just trying to remember, the big scope is playback of meetings that were previously recorded.
Exactly. Yeah. So there's some tool that does that, and then what the company did was they copied their code as well as the MP3 file and their log file, the whole batch via FTP to their website. And since we're moving them from their current website, blending them into the main website, we needed to replace that. Instead of them running their code, we're running ours. So we use Plant an App for that. It worked out really well.
Nice. So, of course, we post content week by week, and like this webinar. And I'm sure I've mentioned previously, we're using AI to pull out topics. Do you have any topic markers, or do they just get the access to the whole meeting?
There are topic markers. That's the key portion of the application, was to create a list of all of the log points, the topic markers, and then Plant an App doesn't do any of that. It's basically JavaScript and the IDs that I create during a loop of taking the list and then acting on each item in the list to build a HTML table, and then the JavaScript watches that table, and when somebody clicks on one of the rows, the audio jumps to that section.
Nice, good deal.
So it's It's not even artificial. It's real intelligence that did it.
Well, glad it was successful. It's always nice to wrap something and get in, see it in use.
Yes, exactly. Although my favorite phrase is "all well that ends." It's nice that all's well that ends well.
Uh-huh.
I do have a question. I just now that I had a moment to think about it. PDFs, they're the bane of most people's existence. There's just way too many of them, and in the government world, they went crazy with them, and everything has to be a PDF, and everything has to be printed out and put in a folder, and the weird thing is that we have to create a PDF and then store it on the computer, where it's multi-megabytes of information, when really it's only a dozen bytes of information. It's a few names, it's a few check boxes of what they're asking for, a few pieces of information that could easily be stored in a database and drastically reduce the amount of space that's being used on the website. But they keep saying that they need PDFs. So I have a new project that I'm going to tackle this week, where they want to fill in. Well, the application is vote by mail. They need to have a document that says, yes, indeed, I want to vote by mail. And so there's a form there where a person applies for it, says, yes, I want to. And there's a few pieces of information, their mailing address and some information about them. And that could easily be stored away, but they want a PDF. So what I'm wondering is there a mechanism, or can you think of a mechanism where it's sort of a PDF on demand? So I know that Planet App can build a PDF, and then what it does is it builds it and stores it. But what I'm wondering is, can you build it, store it, have them do whatever they're going to do with it, print it, save it, whatever they're going to do. Now it's and then delete it so that it's gone, so that it's purely on demand and it's not cluttering up storage, and not something like in a month we'll delete it. We'll just only whenever they want it, they could click on a button that says, give me the PDF of this, and then it's gone.
So you happened to ask me about something that I did as a project about 20 years ago for a student loan processing organization. They needed capability of being able to print a PDF. It was an application. It was a legal document, and the same kind of thing. We needed to. It's important to have proof that that transaction did occur. It's not just data, but it was a real transaction, real PDF. And the way that I solved that is that, it was PDF generation on demand, and they were e-signing this document. The concept that I used at that time was to generate a checksum against the PDF and store that. So the point was that you could prove that you could recreate the PDF with fidelity. Right? So you create the PDF on demand, and you have some form of a checksum against that, and that gets stored in the record. You then repeat the PDF, and then it gets blown away right after they've had a chance to print it or whatever. At a later time, you come back and generate the same PDF, and if the checksum and compute the checksum against that. If it matches, you've proved that it has fidelity to the original.
Oh, okay.
So now the caveat with that is that it would need in order for it to actually prove that, you've got to have control over the PDF creation process and do it exactly the same way the next time. That one byte out of place creates a different checksum that then it doesn't match, and you can no longer prove. So there was a great deal of thought that went into how to go about that creation process to prove it. But that's the overview of something of one way to do that. If they need, the use that you're talking about, I would assume that if somebody came back and said, I need to prove that they really requested a mail-in ballot, that's kind of a proof point that you need to be able to make, right? So
is that's an interesting point. Is the document really the proof, or is the signature, like for instance, if we did the signature add-on with Planet App and stored their signature in the file, is the fact that it's in a database the fidelity that you need? It's an interesting point, because I guess, we can go in there and modify the database. So where's the fidelity?
right. So let's low end of the scale, the brute force method is they have to print out a piece of paper, they sign it, you scan the whole thing in, and you've got to store it forever. And so that's the problem you're trying to get around, right? On the high end, if you store the data points plus the signature, plus can prove that it's all interrelated, again, that fidelity thing, then you can store a lot less. You're storing the data points maybe plus the JPEG of the signature.
Right.
So the way that you can, I mean, conceptually, the way that you deal with that is to say that you take the data points plus the signature, build the PDF, and compute a checksum. Later on, when you want, if you want to reproduce that document, you do the exact same steps. And if the checksum that you compute now matches the one from before, you've proven fidelity. And you can, during the testing of this, you could figure out, for example, if you swapped a different signature or changed the data points in the database, you'd get a different checksum, and proven that changes to the database would be detected, that you could changes to the database would invalidate the document. So you can prove that you haven't changed the data.
Got it. That makes sense. But in a more mechanical part of this is that the print on demand concept, the PDF on demand concept. I can envision giving them a list, and in that list, each row in the list has a button to print PDF. They click that, and they see, the next thing they see is a PDF on the screen. But what's the mechanism to get rid of that file once they've used it?
So I would probably do something like, if you were to create a table that is a list of all the PDFs that you created, you could say that everything created more than 10 minutes ago, I'm going to delete them. So you delete them off the disk, and you delete them off. They have to exist for a period of time for the purpose of actually giving them a chance to print it or download it.
Right.
But then you just, one mechanism would be you just remember in a table all the things that you create and then clean them up. Alternately, if you put them in a place on the file system, you could write something that went through the file system and deleted them by create date greater than 10 minutes or 2 days or whatever your tolerance was. But
is there an action in the list of actions that deal with files? So I could just create a workflow or an automation that runs a workflow, and then the workflow says, go in this folder and delete everything there?
I don't think so. I'm going to take a look. Maybe somebody else knows the answer to this one already. I wasn't paying attention. We picked up a couple more people. Hello. I know we have some things that read some folder related things. I'm going to try and bring them up here, but my site was asleep.
I suppose the simplest thing, if there is no action for that, then the simplest thing is to just create a bit in the record that says a PDF was created, and then loop create a file overnight that says not to do it. Ben's saying no, don't do that.
You're making you more work for yourself. I can send you. I do this myself. I have a lot of areas where I'm generating PDFs on the fly, specifically exactly this situation where they download it. It's a form that they have to print. They have to sign it, submit it back with, scanned, whatever. So I generate it. I allow them to either view it or, have it emailed to them. And then what I do is I have an automation that runs every 5 minutes. I give them basically, based off what I set, it's a 5-minute interval. So the PDF that's generated basically only stays alive for 5 minutes, and then they automatically get deleted. The way that works is a simple SQL statement. It just basically pulls out directly from the files table, finds all of the files that were generated with a created date that was more than 5 minutes ago. And then you can add extra layers of filtering. So you could turn around and say, well, only pull me out the PDFs, or only pull me out TXT files, or whatever it is you want to do. Only pull me out files from this particular directory. You'll see it in the code. But once you get that list, then you just basically, that turns into a list entity. And then you just run through that and do a delete on all of the file IDs. It's pretty.
Got it. Yes,
pretty
that makes perfect
and then
sense.
it's set it and forget it. Only time you ever have to touch it is if you're going to add either a different folder that you want to watch or a different file extension or something like that.
Right. And so that makes perfect sense. So I know what the folder is, so I can just have a SQL that says, go get me a list of the files in this folder with a creation date of X. Very cool.
Well, yeah, I mean, you don't want to do a specific creation date. You just want to do it by a time frame. Yeah.
Less than X. Right. Exactly. I get it. Right. Perfect. Very cool. That'll solve the problem.
So there are, other discussions that have been going on. I think what Ben just mentioned is that he's using this files table. So the platform, the DNN, is mirroring what's on the file system into here.
Right.
And so you can see the kind of information is there. I see that, is there a folder? Oh yeah, folder is here. So that lets you watch particular things. And then Ben did provided an answer on a community forum, and I've mirrored it into our Campfire, but there's a token that synchronizes the folder system with the actual file system with the files table. That's what this was about, right, Ben?
Correct. That's if you are creating a file outside of any of the internal actions from Plantanet. If you use the actions like the generate PDF and whatnot, you don't have to worry about this because that's automatically synchronized. But if you use a Razor script and you create a text file or something to that effect, that's not going to be reflected in the file structure of DNN. So you would need to use something like this. And all it basically says is whatever you find in this folder, synchronize it with the file system.
Oh, that's great.
So there's kind of all these different pieces that you can bring together. And saying what Ben said in maybe a different way, if you're using the actions, they're going to be synchronized automatically. But anything outside, and he brought one case, the Razor is one, but another is like, say you have an FTP site and somebody's dumping files into the file system that DNN doesn't know anything about. That synchronize is the place. You can do it interactively in the site assets. There's a synchronize, but if you want it to be automatic so that you can process on them, then that token is available to you.
Yeah, that's perfect. That's another problem that's going to be coming up fairly shortly. I'm not sure if they're going to demand that they have FTP access to dump some files from another system into the new site. So, but I'm expecting a meeting where they're going to tell me they want that. So that's perfect now that I have a solution.
Yeah, and if it's a one-time thing, then you don't have to, you could come in and after they've done it, you can synchronize them manually. But if it's an ongoing, they could dump it at any time, then you've got to find a solution, and using a token like that together with an automation that just evaluates the token once a day or every 5 minutes or whatever.
Right. Perfect.
This is the resynchronize this folder mechanism within the product. Nice. Thanks for the help.
Ben, does that token, does it resynchronize this folder and all subfolders?
That's a good question. Let me just double check.
Dale, won't that depend too on the version of DNN you're running?
No.
So the site assets is
Thanks.
different in the newer versions of DNN.
The visual of it is different, but it's doing the same functionality. The site assets did change.
Sorry, Mark, I said no to something else. I'm still checking.
That was my files. Just taking a look at it since the question came up and Ben. So I suspect there's an option in here that would allow it to do multiples or iterate through. I don't know. Looks like this might. Won't comment. I don't know this code. So anybody that doesn't have access to campfire.plantonapp.com, if you need it, shoot me your email address and I will be happy to add you so that you can get a hold of these kinds of things. And we can move on. Ben will come back with an answer when he's got it. Something else we want to talk about here?
I have a concept follow-up question to a community post that Mark put out, and which was Ben gave an answer, but it was Mark's question. But Mark, you said you were doing an export content to token, and I've never used that functionality, and I was trying to understand the business process behind there. When you would use something like that. So I thought module content export was just for doing more of development to copy a module from page to page or back it up or something like that. So,
Well, like most answers, I think Ben has a more sophisticated use than I do, but that was for my convenience, because I'm building several modules that I need to use either on multiple pages or on multiple sites. And so the process for me to get those modules over to a new location, it is easier to just export the text and then import the text.
as opposed to copy it, go into design mode and import a module from another page type thing. Is that?
Well, that's
The
relatively
equivalent?
straightforward, but I do go from site to site quite a bit, and I can't do it that way. Then I would have to export the module design, and then get the file and download it, and then move it to a new location and put it in the right spot and import it again. So that's many steps, and I could just copy and paste and be done.
Mark, really quick before we go too far into something else. The token that I created, that's up there for everyone to see. If you open it up and edit it, the last line, the synchronized one, it has two parameters, portal ID and the folder path. Add 2 trues to the end of that. So at the end of the folder path, do true, comma, true, 2 booleans of true. That will make it synchronize all subfolders inside it.
Okay, good. That would be my preferred default, I think.
This one here, true.
Yep, comma, true, comma, true.
Line 20.
You got it.
Okay, thank you, Ben.
You're welcome.
And Jim, another use of exporting that content, you could potentially store that as text, maybe even in like a starter form design. And then a person could click a button and it would then automatically, based on what you told it to do, it would go create a module and import that content into it. So you could think of it as an installation routine that could install modules on pages or on sites.
No, and when I read the post, I forgot that you're hosting multiple sites for multiple people and need to move between sites, where most of my work is all done on 1 or 2 sites, and I'm just enhancing things. So yeah, so that it's just sometimes I see something like that and find out, oh, there's been this secret feature in Planted App or DNN all this time. That, there's been times I've wanted to get module content, but just like out of an action form, I just want to get all the data that's in the fields and bring it out easily. And I haven't at least found that method yet.
What do you mean by all the data that's in the fields? Could you explain that?
If I have an action form with 10 fields that I would want to grab all those 10 fields and put them into a JSON string. I was hoping there was a single function where I could do that, as opposed to looping through or coding. Right now when I need to do it, I go through and I manually go through each of the fields and add them into the JSON. And I was thinking maybe there's a function somewhere that will just let me take all those module fields without knowing their names and put them into a JSON. But I haven't had time to explore that, so I used the brute force method that works all the time. But when I was reading your post, that was what I was thinking maybe you were doing.
So Jim, on that, as far as I know, there is no built-in action that will do that for you. I did a low-code feature focus a long time ago. If you turn on the data save data to reports, the fields when you on submit get written to special tables. Actually, I think it's called action form reports, but they're written both as JSON and then individual field values. And so then that gives you something that you could select off of and iterate through. So if you don't mind having them in the reports table, which expands the amount of data that you have, that's one very easy way to do it.
I'll go look at that. I mean, I've never used the reports table functionality, so I will go look at that and see if that, because I just need it for a little bit to build these JSONs and start moving them around, and then I could go back and delete it out of the table.
Yep. Let's see if I can find my low-code feature focus. Not too hard to
Under the list of names to change, when I think reports, I think paper.
Uh-huh.
And I go, oh, that's not what it is.
Or they had the ability to turn that off. I actually had created an automation that used to run periodically to purposely erase everything in that table, because in the early days, that used to be a forced behavior. Everything you submitted always got saved, and that table just kept getting bigger and bigger. So it was something I never used, so I just went in and always purposely erased it.
So, yeah, I found it here. Let me clear it out. And then separately, I've done a custom action that's come up here a couple of times in Campfire, where it iterates through all the tokens that are in a context and just stores them in JSON. And so it is a custom action. I could make it available if somebody wanted it, but the idea is it gets everything, which is to me kind of useful, because sometimes I don't know what exactly has been created in context. So just be able to take a look at your variables is useful.
Is that something you'd want to publish to the Campfire website?
I could do that. I would do that for you. I might even make it available on the marketplace when we do that, because it's a very simple pro code action that just adds an action to the interface. So, okay.
Since you mentioned the marketplace, is there an update on the time when it's going to be launched?
We are working on it daily. I would like to say it'll be done within the month. I don't have an exact timeline, but
Cool.
We considered it an important thing to do, and to have there's a lot of moving pieces to it, but we're targeting them.
Dale, have y'all written a action for the authorized net hosted payment form yet?
We haven't made any new changes to authorized.net that I'm aware of.
So no hosted payment form then?
I don't know what's in there, but there hasn't been anything that's come through in a long time. We have, I'm just kind of curious now what is in there. Yeah, like I said, this hasn't changed. This is what's
provided. Yep. No, it's not there.
Okay. There's a on the feature request, there is a and I will sponsor this option. So if it's something that's of value to you and you want to quote for what it would take to do that, we would be happy to do that. But other than that, there's, I
Well,
haven't heard anyone call
yeah.
for it. So
The reason I ask is that in order to be PCI compliant, you have to use a hosted payment form. So I just wondered, maybe most people don't need to use a hosted payment form because they're storing or not storing credit card information. But when you deal with thousands and thousands and thousands of people, like the banks make you use a hosted payment form.
mhm.
The hosted payment means that you send off the payment request to Authorize, and they collect the credit card information, so you don't have any. You never see the card.
You're calling one of their forms on your site, and so when the customer puts their credit card information in, you never see it. It goes into Authorized.net's hosted payment form. They store it in their database. They give you back a payment profile ID and a customer profile ID, and you use that if you need to charge their card in the future. You'll use the payment profile ID to charge their card.
Got it.
I believe that our Stripe actions, it's not Authorized.net, it's Stripe, does just that it returns a Stripe ID that can then subsequent charges can be made to it where it's not where you don't have the credit card information. So.
Yeah, but that would work for anybody that's using Stripe, but obviously not everybody can. Some people have to use Authorized.net.
I mean, Authorized.net is just one particular provider, right? There's lots of people that do that work.
Right.
And so, yeah, again, it could be developed for custom, but we haven't done that. And I'm just pointing out for people who don't have that, yes, you could use Stripe. Our PayPal action, which doesn't, our PayPal action does that kind of handoff dialogue where it passes you off to PayPal to finish it. And so anything that's collected here doesn't, the credit card information, the PCI information is not transferred back to the site, just the payment kinds of things. And there's, so
PayPal though is not the best solution because you don't always get your authorization back immediately. There may be a lag there, and with our customers, we can't afford that lag. We have to have real-time approvals.
Yep, and I'm not. I'm only pointing out for people following behind that there's a number of options that are available in the product.
Right.
Your individual, your use case has to be taken up, and we have dealt with this before. That there are limitations to and features of each of the ones, and you have to figure out what's appropriate in your case.
We have a similar situation with the Elevon gateway. Not having support for that, we can't use Planet App. We've got a Razor Cart application that David Smith wrote a gateway for us for Elevon, but we would love to convert that whole application into a Planet App application and get rid of that Razor Cart, and the other piece kind of blended two main big pieces, an Xmod Pro and a Razor Cart together to make it all work. Would rather make it an application in Planet App.
Bearing in mind, in most cases, things that we haven't integrated with, as we've shown any of our integrate anything kinds of things, that server requests do it yourself can typically be done. So you could do the Elevon gateway with a server request. It's the question of having us do it with an action to make it low code instead of
No. Okay, that's an interesting concept. So I can go to Elevon and say, how do I do this? And
what's
then
your
go,
API?
yeah, and use server request to figure that
And
out.
much like Jerry Maddox has done with whether it's Firebase or the Google Analytics, there is this trick. The problem always with these APIs is getting through their security. Each API has its own, here's what you must do to be secure, and that ranges from a very simple, here's an API key, if you have the key you can open the door, all the way to very sophisticated or complex, not even necessarily sophisticated, but I've dealt with them where you have to build the request in a certain way and then run a checksum on the request, and so it can be a real pain to get through their security. But once you figure out how to get through their security, then typically you have a bearer token, something that you could just pass along with each request to say, yep, you already checked my security, here's my code, and now I want to do this. And you can see us, I'm sure we've done some videos with things like getting through, we did some with Zoom, how to create meetings and things like that. And whether you're talking about a payment gateway or you know, Zoom or any other service, if you have the API documentation, and you can use server requests typically to get through it.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, Jerry's written the AuthNet hosted payment form stuff for us, but it would just be nice if it was an action so you could very easily drop it into a form instead of having 3 or 4 pages that you got to go through and recreate it each time. No big deal. We're doing it, so you know.
Mm-hmm. Yep, and you know, just kind of as a general topic, if you do that work through something that this server request type thing that I'm talking about, if you build it as a workflow where you get through security, for example, might be one workflow, and then it almost becomes low code for you. When you get to the point where you're trying to use it, you just call the workflow. I need the Elevon security, and it gives you back the token, and now you can go on. So I'm just pointing out from a technique standpoint, if you find yourself coding these things in the button on a form, it's not very reusable. If you code it in a workflow, now it's very reusable, and you can call it from that button on the form. That makes sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
I got a question for Ben. I'm sure a few of you anyway have had to deal with the new Google GA4. We converted over, we used Google Analytics to track the progress of videos that our reps, when they share videos with their leads, we need to report that information back to the rep. And with the new GA4, what we found is that Google only reports back to you now in batches, and it appears to be that it's in a 24-hour cycle. So, Ben, is there any way to, like, all of these videos are hosted at Vimeo, and you know, we've got the little script from Vimeo to use with Google Analytics, but is there any other way to track this from our website and eliminate Google Analytics from the process so that we can tell this video has been played, or it's at 25% progress, 50%, 75, or 100%.
Sorry, at that point, I don't have an answer for you on that. I don't use videos. I don't track it. I used Google Analytics many years ago, and I basically stopped because it wasn't information that I really needed and tracked. There have been some times where I needed to track, how many clicks and stuff like that. And that's something that could be done, with button actions or whatever, just store into a table that, increment the number of clicks or whatever. But as for how long a video has been playing, that I couldn't assist with, because that, to my understanding, you would have to have some sort of middleman application, some player, something that is watching the video so it knows when it reaches a particular point in the video to then record that it's gotten that far.
Yeah, and that's what that script is supposed to do for Google, that Vimeo provides you. It's their player that is, tracking it, but then using that script, it gets reported to Google, and Google just reports back to you basically the progress of the video being played. I just was wondering if there was.
I'm sorry, not to cut you off. If they're giving you a script, like I said, the idea of being able to know how far in a video someone has viewed most definitely has to come from whatever the player is. So that's something that you can't just put a link to a video and play it and get that information. The player itself has to be able to support that. However, that being said, if it's a Vimeo player and Vimeo is sending you, I'm assuming when you say script, you're talking to JavaScript. Then my first thought is their JavaScript must have in it where they say, like, here's the URL that you're going to submit the information to Google Analytics. Somewhere you're going to be either setting up thresholds saying like report when it hits 25, 50%, 75%, something like that. Or
that's what we've done in Google.
Right. And then I'm assuming somewhere you also have to designate the link to Google. Like, this is my account. This is the URL where you're going to submit that information to Google. At that point, what you could potentially do is replace that URL that's pointing to Google and instead create an API on your system and have that API get that information that your Vimeo player is sending and store that information locally. Cut Google out of it completely. Just have it report to itself.
Yeah, that's what we're attempting to do. We do have a single page that all videos are viewed on the website, and we know the ID of the video, we know the length of the video. We've got quite a bit of information from Vimeo on each video. I just wasn't sure if we could cut Google out of the picture. I would love to do so.
Hey, Dennis, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, like I said, I mean, as long as there's a URL that you can tweak in that JavaScript code, I don't see why not. If you've got all the information on hand, whatever information it's sending to Google Analytics, you just redirect it to a different API, your own personal API. The only thing is, like I said, whatever the data is, what you might have to do initially is use something like Postman or whatever to see the format of the data that the Vimeo application is sending. and
Yep.
then code your API to be able to read that data and then just use it as you need it. But again, this is just guessing because I've never used that stuff. Sorry, Matt,
Yeah.
your turn.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks. Hey, Dennis, I don't know if this is a possibility for you, but I use a platform called Wistia, and
I'm
similar.
familiar with it.
Okay. You might want to check out their analytics, because they do have, at least by your description, they might have what you're looking for in terms of kind of native analytics instead of shipping it off to Google. You can do things like heat mapping and, you know, tracking things by user, by video up to the moment. So I would suggest it, you know, if this is a problem, you might want to take a look at it and see if that might be worth it for you.
Yeah, our biggest challenge, Matthew, is that every video that is shared has what we call a lead share ID that we attach to it. We generate that and we attach it to the URL. And that's the way that we track who the person is that's actually watching the video, so that we can report it back to our rep. What I've seen, like in Vimeo, is that they'll give you general, you know, like, hey, this video's been viewed 400 times today, and, you know, this long and all of that kind of stuff. But I need to put it in a funnel and funnel it down to the actual individual user that watched it. But I can check out Wistia. Like I said, I've never used them, but we pay Vimeo a hell of a lot of money every year to host the videos, because we've got thousands of them that we host on Vimeo. So we may be able to get some additional help from them as well, using their API stuff. When we first checked into it a couple of years ago, they didn't have that capability. But anyway, yeah, we'll dig more. I just thought I'd throw that out here, since we were discussing different things here. So somebody might have run across something like that.
Yeah.
I appreciate the help, guys.
Yeah, no worries. With Wistia, you can pass the user information as part of the string to track it right down to the user. So whether that's an email address or anything like that. So, you know, if you got that many videos, maybe it's not practical, but I would say something to at least be familiar with.
Yeah, I'll check it out. Thanks, Matthew.
You are welcome.
So I see that Mark has posted a link to video analytics for Vimeo, and separately, I have sent you, Dennis, a potential direction where you can use, if you can control the JavaScript of the player, much like what Ben was suggesting, some suggestions on how you can capture the events, and then it's just a matter of transferring them. So there's some hints in there, and yeah, we'd be happy to, if you pick a direction, I'm sure you can get some help.
Okay. Thanks, Dale.
Sure. So if anybody has if anybody was on the call with or the webinar on Wednesday where I talked about DataLocker, if anybody has any feedback from that, I would love to hear it.
Yes, that was cool.
I had an email dialogue back and forth with Mark a little bit. I'm debating as to whether or not that deserves a third session. I showed how it could be used. I didn't show how it was put together. Be happy to show how it was put together. I'm just trying to figure out if that would be, you know, a good use of your time. A good session to get reported.
So Dale, I have
Well,
a question. It seems like at least conceptually, that was built on your previous work, your utility. I think it was a Campfire contribution. Is that not? It seemed that way. Is that correct?
No, all that was a fresh build. There wasn't anything old.
I think it's worth a deeper dive, frankly.
This has been rolling around in my head for a month, trying to express this need for session storage and doing it in kind of a uniform way, and with multiple scopes. So it feels to me like a framework that would be useful if you were starting a new site, or even retrofitting it into an existing site. But I think in the absence of a framework, and I mean, DataLocker is just one approach to it, but in absence of a framework, we basically all, as we build a site, have to figure out how we're going to pass this information around within our application. And unless you approach it in some kind of organized way, then the next site is going to be different and not. And all of this, of course, so often it's all inspired by what Ben does. What would Ben do? Because I mean, he's shown things when you approach it in a systematic way, what you can get out of it, and he's demonstrated on this call before how such an approach he uses it to go for to maintain page state, even if people back through your website and things like that. So it was intended to help with things like that.
Yeah, I think
In
it's
your-
great to do.
Yeah.
Go ahead,
In your
Jim.
video, you said you were going to make it available in the marketplace, but how do we get it sooner to give you more feedback?
I'll tell you what, I am going to be wrapping it up into a zip so that I can test it going on the marketplace. I would be happy to provide that. So it would be a series of importing an entity, importing some workflows, importing some tokens. So I'll put it together. I'm doing the work anyway. So
I'm happy to be on your test list, because I have one of the problems of a session variable that is not going between, that needs to change going between tabs. So rather than go fix it, I'd rather, or create my own solution, I'd rather implement something that's working. So.
Well, as I cautioned when I presented it, it's a lot of thought, but not a lot of miles into it yet. So I don't want to present it as perfect, but I think it is at least considered.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing how that works, Dale.
All right. Well, when I put that together, I will make sure that this group is aware that it's available and anybody can grab it. We'll put it someplace where you can grab it. All right, we have 2 minutes left. Last call.
Can I interject
yes.
one thing?
Yes.
This is actually about the video thing, so this is for Dennis. I was just curious, is there a particular reason other than the analytics that you're hosting on a third-party provider? Do you have the ability to host these videos locally? You're muted.
Yeah, we could host them locally. The problem is there are literally thousands of these videos, and we have over, close to 50,000 people that use the software. So it would be a monumental drain of resources to do so.
All right. I was just asking because if you had that ability, I mean, I just did a quick little research run. It looks like you could use like an HTML5 video player And there is Java code that you can intercept and bind on a time update and time ended, and have that call off an Ajax API call, and then send it whatever data it is you want to send. And you can track it and store it in your own databases as you see fit, whichever piece of information you want. And if I'm not mistaken, the way the time update works, that actually goes by, it looks like by the second. So you have the ability to actually track percentages, and you could actually see if they zip across the, the timeline. So, if you, let's say, recorded every 1% that they've watched, if they zip across and they only did, 10% and then zipped to the end, they're still only going to be at maybe about 11% because they skipped everything in between. But again, I mean, it looks like it's possible. But yeah, like you said, if it's something that is going to be too heavy a lift, then I guess that may not be an option for you. So sorry, just thought I'd give you some info.
Yeah, I'm just more concerned, I think, about bandwidth, than anything, with the number of users that we have that doing this. And as you know, videos eat a lot of not just bandwidth, but also disk space too.
In the spirit of brainstorming, I will point out that we have a connector to Amazon Web Services, so that that files that are stored on Amazon's S3 storage can appear as if they are on your server. And in that scenario, I think they would then be, that would solve the disk space issue, because S3 is unlimited size. You're just paying for what you're using. And it also solves the bandwidth problem, because it would actually be served from Amazon servers instead of your local system. So the S3 connector would make it look like it's coming from your site when it's actually, and make it available to you to link to and things like that, but it's actually being served by Amazon. So another thing to brainstorm, put into the mix. Okay,
I'll take a look at that, Dale. Thank you.
Absolutely. So we've hit our hour, had a good conversation, and so I appreciate you guys showing up week by week. And I'll just throw in, we missed Patrick today. He took the day off, and a well-deserved day off. So hang around for a few minutes if you like. We're going to turn off the recording, go into our Afterglow segment, and we can just enjoy each other for a few minutes. All right. Thanks. We'll see you guys next week.
Thanks, Dale.
Thanks.